It's time for more Pretty Cure. Finally, I actually managed to record another Pretty Cure video. It's real Pretty Cure moment. And Pretty Cure All Stars DX3 deliver the future rainbow flower that connects the world. I wrote delivery when I was trying to write the title down. That's wrong, but close enough, I guess. I This movie was a little better than the last Pretty Cure All Stars DX film, and probably the one before that after, or also. One and two were okay. They were fine. This one was pretty good. I like this one considerably more. It also wastes absolutely no time getting around to the meat of the film, which is to say, the part where the cures get thrown around like rag dolls for like 40 minutes before they find the power of friendship to stand together, even when apart, to beat the bad guys. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After approximately 2 minutes of the girls meeting one another at a mall, tons of fairies pour in from all over the other movie worlds, followed very quickly by the appearance of the antagonists from the previous series films. I do not think Baron Salamander should have been there, because he wasn't killed like pretty much all of the others. And later on in the film, they actually address this, but it is when Peach addresses that Toy Majin found happiness when his heart was purified. In the Fresh movie, we saw that he wasn't killed either, which makes his appearance here also odd, considering we're directly told the evil from their hearts when they were defeated went on to form Black Hole. So I guess we can assume that the purification expelled that evil, and then the evil that was in Toy Majin went to form Black Hole, which is like, fine, sure, I guess. But that's expunging the evil, not purifying it. And that's sure not happened with pretty much all of the other movie antagonists, and is about to again as soon as they get to the end. Because, oh boy, the cures are coming, and they brought their big old laser beams that they have to hold hands to shoot. In an effort to defeat the Pretty Cure, the Dark Witch from the first Pretty Cure movie, whose name I'm pretty sure is actually just Dark Witch, splits the girls up. We get like 3 minutes of them just being thrown into the air and hurled across the sky, which is incredibly funny when each here flies by the camera and gives a short scream twice. They do it at two different points because they get hurled, thrown up first, and they all get like a scream, and then they kind of float around in the air for a little bit and get blown up around by wind before they're actually separated. And then they all get another one right after that. It is genuinely like comical because it's like 2021 girls being thrown around, and they brought their VAs into the studio and said, "All right, I need you to give one good scream, just a short one, right? Okay, go, good, and stop. No, the 1 second scream. No, done, easy, got it in one. Okay, now do it again." Uh, our pink cures are thrown off into one direction. Our blue and our deuteragonist cures get thrown another way, and our tertiary and more brightly colored cures a third direction. It makes sense to split them up. We've got a little over 20 of these girls. That makes sense. Throw them around a little bit. But they didn't jumble them up. They kind of split them into neat groups of, you guys are the leaders. You guys are the second ones. You guys are everybody else. I keep wanting to say duotagonist instead of deuteragonist, and I'm not like 100% certain on that pronunciation. Like, I'm pretty sure on it. I looked it up even, but like, now that I'm saying it out loud, it's not a word that, you really hear very much. The actual work put in by the various cures felt a little bit more balanced this time around, even if the film was still a bit focused on melody and rhythm as the new season reps, because this is a Sweet Pretty Cure season release movie, which is fine and expected. The film focuses on the fun dynamic between them as a recently made newbie Pretty Cure, and introduces the sort of relationship between Melody and Blossom as a recent veteran Pretty Cure. It, Dividing the groups up is probably for the best, so they could all, Melody and Rhythm at least, find their footing a bit, and more importantly, not have like a million anime girls in the same spot. I say that like it's not one of my favorite parts of the film. This is when they're all standing together shooting beams or having a big old fight scene where it's 30 people jumping around one another doing some sick parkour over their friends to kick a guy in the head. It's very good. There's a really good scene for both of them, the main groups, where the leads all land in the desert, and Blossom lands headfirst on top of Melody while all the other lead Kiers fall into a pile next to her. And then on the other end, landing on boats and in the ocean, where Mint catches Rhythm in her arms, princess style. It's all very cute and fun. She's like, "Oh, thank you." And then Marine just kind of crashes down into the water behind them while everybody else landed safely on top of a boat that's sticking out of the water, half sank. It just very good. They didn't get anything kind of fun like that for the tertiary groups, unfortunately. They just kind of were standing on the ground already. But I think their scenes were actually kind of a lot more fun in general. The focus on Lemonade being the goofy one, getting the board game going for the third group, was specifically made for me because she's my favorite. And Moonlight is also the only one in the tertiary group who has more than two brain cells and really keeps them focused once they start scattering around during the games, which is fun. There's a world out there where Moonlight is a lead cure, taking a much more somber approach to magical girling, which could be interesting to see, but it's not really what it's about a lot of the time. So I think it's fine that she's kind of more of a subgroup leader because it fits well for her, keeping them organized while they try to reunite with everyone else. But the games that the third group went through were a lot of fun. The actual challenges that they had to overcome, all of the groups, were kind of the same, at least for the main two groups, where they needed to defeat the monster of the weeks that showed up and beat up the villain from whatever movie they were having to face. Each group kind of got two that showed up and taunted them for a while. Except the second group, they actually had Friesen and Frozen, but they're a combo package, so they do not separate, and then find a way out of the location they were in to reunite with their friends. Both of these first two groups went through similar arcs, the lead cures focusing on never giving up, and their best friends realizing they can always rely on their closest friend, but also to never give up. Our third group are having a way more fun time throughout the board game section from the Fresh movie, and it's honestly some of the most fun parts of the film. They do a bunch of one-off games, but are also in longer sections of bowling or whack-a-mole and just kind of fun game stuff. And they're just having a good time with it. They show up and they say, "Hey, we're going to play a board game and you're not going to fight the antagonists." And they say, "Okay, yes I am. Guess we're going to have a good time with it." And it's a good time for the movie too. Both of the main groups are the primary focus, of course. They get the majority of the screen time, as the movie is largely set up to hype up the new season, and Melody is in one group and Rhythm is in the other. They do not have a tertiary career yet at this point, as it does come out about 10 episodes into Sweet Pretty Cure. Similar to the last film, it does a lot to make Melody and Rhythm feel out of their depth and like they have a lot to learn about being a pretty cure, which they do. The film accomplishes this in a way that I feel is much more effective than the previous ones because it's kind of just a more enjoyable film than the previous ones. They aren't bad films, but they're just okay. This film does so where rather than everyone kind of arbitrarily deciding that they have to be the big focus, the split the teams to sort of naturally work in the manner that best suits the sweet pretty Kira, who is put with them, and they split them up to show them kind of what they need to do rather than telling them what they need to be doing. They do a pretty good amount of show, don't tell here by this. But honestly, their friendship and trust monologues also probably count as telling, which is fine because that's kind of like a lot of the show is speeches about friendship and trust and love and compassion and all of that kind of fun stuff. But the actual majority of the show don't tell that I feel is kind of present there is Melody is with the main protagonists of the different seasons of Pretty Cure, and they're just getting thrown sideways. They're getting thrown left and right and up and down and thrown around in the sand oven place because it's a combination of the sandy clock world from the Splash Star movie and the desert oven from the Pretty Cure 5 Go Go film. Where they're in the Kingdom of Sweets or something. And the Cures have their different leading styles. We primarily get to see Cure Black's leading style, where she can just kind of give odd, vague directions, and White and Shiny Luminous would know exactly what she's talking about. The others kind of get a little bit confused when they're going through it, but that's fine. They figure it out. And the raw determination that Cure Dream has. She's always the first one back on her feet whenever they get knocked around. Girl can take a punch. She's kind of a human punching bag a lot of the time. And her filling is friendship. And they do, I think, a pretty good job of using this to sort of act as a guide for what Melody needs to be in order to successfully be a lead Pretty Cure, because she doesn't know that that's her job, but it is her job. That is the archetype that she fills, and I think that they show that in a pretty good way. It's kind of cool that the way they accomplish that, and the same thing kind of goes for the secondary group with Rhythm, because these are Cures who, right when they're about to start their fighting, like 4 of them are like, okay, go get him, best friend. And then their best friend isn't there because then they got separated. And all of them are just like, oops, well, she's always the first one to jump into the fray. So, I kind of thought that she would be here and ready to do that. But it sets up a dynamic where they rely on their friend to be the one to take charge, but it shows that while they can rely on them to do that, they also have to be the one to decide that they also need to get into the fight. They can't wait on the other person to do that, even if they know they can rely on the other person to do that. It's not quite as maybe pronounced as a lesson for Rhythm, but I think it makes sense for her to get something like that, as she is kind of the secondary and protagonist for Sweet Pretty. I almost said secondary antagonist, and for the first couple of episodes of Sweet Pretty Cure, she kind of feels like that to me, because you kind of know how I feel about Sweet Pretty Cure already. If we were going purely by their relationship in this movie, Melody and Rhythm are rambunctious best friends. They're loud and impassioned and ready to run around with everyone else, even if they don't really understand what's going on or what they need to be doing, and even when they aren't sure if they're good enough to keep going. This is a stark contrast to kind of how they behave in the show up to this point. I don't remember the exact episode, but it's probably about 8 or 9, maybe 10 episodes in to Sweet Pretty Cure, where they just kind of fight for real and not in a cute bickering ha 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 way, where they just straight up dislike each other the vast majority of the time. They despise each other for a lot of the intro of Sweet Pretty Cure. And this movie does not get into that element of their relationship, because they're hanging out at a mall. They're trying to get their funny cat to stop jumping off the balcony to go check out the fashion show that's going on stage. They're stretching out Hummy's face because she's being a little brat, and they're having a good time of it. They're arguing, but they're not fighting. They're just having any sort of argument any two people who enjoy hanging out together might, where it's like, oh, I don't think you should have done that. Well, we did it anyway, so you're gonna have to deal with that. Guess I will. But That's not how they act in Sweet Pretty Cure up to this point. Later on, sure, but early, no. The moments we get between Melody and Hummy are also good. And Hummy sweep, as usual, and it's nice getting to see them talk and bicker. Similar to kind of how the main cures interact with their mascots and their fairies in the first two seasons. It's kind of fun. The maybe not tense relationship that they have, but in the you're causing problems because you have no thoughts in your head, and I don't want you to embarrass me, for one, and for two, get found out as a magical talking animal guy. But you're trying to do your damnedest to do that anyway. But they're just having a good time of it, and that kind of vibe is always fun for the show. That's always a good dynamic. The mascots were also helping deal with the enemies that showed up, as best they could anyway, which was a pretty neat change of pace. They often do not get to do very much of that, or what they did for doing that was not very good. They all have to deal with Shadow, while the Cures are fighting off the other movie antagonists. The downside to this is that Shadow, who was a very cool villain for their movie, is kind of reduced to a bit of a joke. But it's still entertaining in the movie, so I'll give that a pass. Shadow was very funny and very flamboyant, but just kind of goofy in chasing around the fairies rather than the movie version of Shadow, which was, I'm going to make evil shadow clones of you, and I'm going to kill you. The fairies also kill Shadow. They just murk them with the miracle lights, and it's kind of crazy because they take Shadow's mirrors, which is part of Shadow's magic, and say, we're stealing these, we're putting our miracle lights up against them, and we're sending you back to hell. And like, it doesn't do the thing that the movie villains at the end of this movie do when all the Cures beat them. They don't fade into dust and then a dark flame exits their body and disappears into space to fuel the final antagonist, Black Hole. But Shadow just disappears into light, which means they obliterated Shadow with the miracle lights, which is kind of funny. They also put some personal stakes in this film beyond just the bad guys winning and bringing darkness to the world. In order for the Cures to defeat Black Hole, they have to use the last of the power of the Prism Flower, or the Rainbow Flower. I'm honestly not sure which, had to transform, and the trade off with using the last of that power being that the mascots would be forced back into their own worlds and unable to return to Earth from then on. It serves as a connection between these worlds, and with that flower gone, that connection would no longer exist. This is probably the closest the antagonists get to winning, and I probably say that multiple times about these movies, just especially the movie reviews, because that's kind of how things go most of the time. But it was really close this time. Like, really close. But it's a good thing that they win then. In one of the most dramatic final showdowns in the series to date, even for the movies. Black Hole looks to be exactly that and easily dwarfs the entire planet, probably several of them. They have several different perspectives at different points that kind of show various scales of Shadow. One of them is a little bit larger than the planet, or I guess a lot larger than the planet, but very flat. He's kind of a big astral eyeball, which is very intimidating. Such a cool design. But then another one is like way far away and way bigger looking as a result. And I think that this final battle is one matched only in scale in some of the earlier seasons, where the scale of the conflict and antagonist is just that large, literally. Despite multiple antagonists being planetary threats or greater, there's something about the inhuman force of pure evil that sets those finales apart from the still pretty grand conflicts that the later Cures undergo. My one real complaint is that the sweet girls didn't get to kill their own antagonist during everyone showing off their teamwork and growth as a team. This makes sense because we don't really have anyone they could have beaten yet because we're like 10 episodes into Sweet Pretty Cure. We don't have an antagonist for them to kill because they haven't beaten anyone yet, really. But that means that it's kind of fine. Fighting the world's greatest evil duo from the second Max Heart film, Friesen and Frozen, to prove their worth as a fighting pair was a pretty good substitute. Another assorted thing is that melody and rhythm get super modes when they all power up at the end due to the planet-wide spirit bomb, I mean miracle light, which is, I think, the largest to date because it's glowing up the entire planet. And their super modes are very clearly different outfits that have more frills and flowery bits attached to them. Whereas Bloom and Egret kind of almost feel the same. And the idea that the new girls get a movie only super mode that they get, you know, is just kind of really funny when two of the oldest cast members don't get anything like that. I Bloom and Egret don't get shit in this house, and they give melody and rhythm like half-formed super modes that they will not use. Like maybe the designs are the same as their super modes in the Sweet Pretty Cure movie. I don't remember, but it doesn't matter because I haven't gotten to that movie yet for this. But it's just so wild. Like they have the little magic wings and everything, but Bloom and Ingrid don't get shit in this house. It's tragic. But what else is fun is the fun, upbeat music playing during the incredibly sad, sobbing slideshow of everyone having to deal with the connection between their worlds being cut off now that the flower of the rainbow power, sure, is gone. They do, of course, recover, and as they're always connected in their hearts, or whatever they said in the film, because that's like part of the lesson of it, and they go back to their vacation as intended, until, thanks to the power of the miracle seeds from the tree present in HeartCatch PreCure, a new rainbow flower is born, allowing the connection between the worlds to blossom once again. And it's very cool how they go about that. It's a very natural way for the crossover media to sort of connect itself together. It's very nice, and it also serves as the connection between, the most recent season and the actual current season. It's fun how they go about that. Honestly, like this All-Star DX3 was a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable and much more so than the previous DX films, which is unfortunate, but I think it kind of shows that they're figuring out what they want to do with the DX films as they go through it. They're figuring out what they want the crossovers to look like, how they want the cures to interact better, or how to split them up in a way that gets them to have fun moments together, but doesn't drag down the film because they've got 80 people standing in one spot. And I think that's pretty cool. I like this movie. It was fun. I think it's a pretty good 8 out of 10 film. It's a nice, pretty cure movie. Visually, it's really nice. It honestly, like, it seems, it's been a little bit since I watched DX2, but it's a pretty decent step up from the last one. It is the 10th Pretty Cure movie, so like they're probably pumping a little more budget into that as a result. But like it just looks visually nice a lot of the time. Not to say the others don't, but you kind of get what I mean. And one of the things I would also note about that is the HeartCatch girls look pretty dang close to being on model the entirety of the film, even when they are very clearly not being animated by the exact, art style that Pretty Cure had for that season. Because it was a very different art style than every season before and after. But they still look really on model, which can't be said about DX2 because they really don't for a lot of that movie, unfortunately, which is fine. Like it gets it done, but it's just not as good. And it was good here. And I think that's really good for them, considering they put a little bit of focus on Blossom and the HeartCatch girls as passing on the torch kind of thing. I don't know, it's just fun. It's a good movie, pretty good watch.